Okay, so I am going to make a video that isn't about identity one day. I swear to God, I promise you I am. But I wanted to talk about the UK's legacy identity. And I wanted to talk about why we're in the shit and what happens when you're in an identity crisis, right? I want you to Google a book called Economic Consequence of Peace and just read the first paragraphs in that book. And think Brexit. Honestly, just Google it. Stop the video. Google. Get it up. And read that first couple of paragraphs. And what it describes is the events that led up to World War I, and it talks about acts of reckless self-regard and insane delusion. And what that was referring to was the actions of Kaiser Wilhelm's lot. And what Hayek really talks beautifully about, he's really a fine writer, by the way, he's one of the finest writers of the 20th century, if you ask me. And he had watched this country descend from like this stable, old, the Habsburg Empire, who were their monarchy, were old, like this was an old dynasty, they're actually one of the most interesting dynasties in Europe, I reckon. But basically, by the time you get to like the turn of the century, we're moving away from like monarchy being even a good way of doing things. And what Hayek witnessed was the period where we didn't know what else to do. And, you know, the period where fascism emerges as a consequence of the catastrophic events of World War II. Now, we are going through a period very much like that. Now, I'm a history nut, like a proper history nut. Like, I spend far too much time obsessing, and what I'm always looking for is periods in time like this where we're going from one stage to another. So I'm really interested in the end of the medieval period, and the bit that I'm more interested at the minute is the transition between Wessex dynasties to the Vikings to the Normans, and the way that we've written kind of Canute and Emma, and that's the period where we emerged onto the European stage actually. That's a really interesting period. But the period that we're in at the moment, there isn't a comparable event in about 1,000. That's the last time there was a comparable change to the one that we're about to go to. And that was the point in time where we started to develop a coherent national identity. And we emerged onto the European stage, and, you know, our progress from what it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, it's largely been up-ish since then. And what we now have to go through is a period where we have to adjust to the reality of our position in the world. And for quite a while, it's been evident that we are not who we think we are. We've been walking into the EU and behaving like complete and utter twins, even though we've been treated like top-tier players and we haven't had any entitlement to be so. I had a period about 2012, I was reading the FT all the time. I swear to God, I could barely afford to eat, and I kept spending £2.50 on a bloody newspaper. It's not good, is it? And like over the course of a year, you could see like the shine going off sector after sector after sector in our economy, and nobody had noticed this. And we've got massive sources of instability down, you know, in London. And then our foreign policy, you know, I saw a really great documentary about Afghanistan called The Last Great Hurrah, or The Last Roar. I'll find it and I'll put a link underneath. And we have kind of overplayed our hand. You know, we've been living on the fumes of empire since 45 because we've had stable international relations. And actually, while we've had, you know, the troubles in Northern Ireland and we've had huge difficulties there, we've been a stable union, more or less-ish, for quite a significant chunk of this century. And we've just thrown ourselves over a cliff where our international relations are up in smoke. Our internal tensions are all exposed. All the power relations that used to be mediated by institutions and agreements are becoming exposed. And that's really scaring me because I can see that more than other people, and it's not good. And most of those power relations have to be re-resolved, which is how I know that the shifts in Playlist 1 will be accommodated, because you have to have the power relations have to be exposed so they can be renegotiated. And will generally settle. There's certain aspects of the rule of law that we'll just go back to as equilibrium, and that's the stuff that I'm talking about. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that has to be renegotiated. Our international relations, we might you know, we might end up with a united Ireland. Scotland could go independent. I think Scottish independence is inevitable, to be honest. I think that's just a matter of time. And what we're coming to a point is where we're being faced up to the reality of our identity. But in the meantime, our entire system is in denial of this. And the problem is that when you're in an identity crisis, you're prone to doing stupid stuff. Like, I think a lot about identity. I can't allow things to become part of my identity that can be ripped away from me. Like, I can't do that. And my identity is not formed the way that a lot of other people's is. I have to be really, really careful and think a lot about stuff. Because I actually know what it is to make something part of your identity and have it taken away and to be left without identity. And you know, that's a period where you're likely to be fucking doing crazy shit. And the problem is that the whole of Westminster is in the middle of this fucking identity crisis and prone to doing stupid shit because they don't want to face up to the reality of their identity. Whereas the rest of us, we know that we need to adjust to a new age. Like, in many senses, we're like agrarian peasants wondering what the Industrial Revolution is like, but for the first time, the UK is looking at a future where the rest of the world could possibly stabilise because of us, actually, because of our instability, and they're going to kind of turn away from us. And we're just kind of going to be left trying to figure this shit out. But this scares the shit out of me, because at the minute, the only policy reflex that we've got is lashing out at people like me. And the reason that I've done all this is because I'm really scared that that's going to happen. Like, I'm genuinely frightened. You know, I've just seen the rule of law undermined for me over 8 years, and nobody's said a damn thing. Like, nobody has said a damn thing, and when I've said a damn thing, everybody's gone, you're not supposed to say that. Well, I don't fucking give a shit. Because the nearest comparator that I can find, and people make a mistake when they do this, because we're a cyclical species, they go to different points in time where you can see these dynamics. In actual fact, you can see these dynamics often. You can see these dynamics in as much reading Edmund Burke and reading about George III and the American Revolution, the French Revolution, as you can about 1905. But realistically, where this country is where Germany was at the turn of the century, well, maybe later. And while we have all the work that men like Hayek and Keynes have done during these periods to try and make sure that we learn from this stuff, we've kind of not been able to see what they were getting at because we couldn't see the power dynamics that they were talking about, and you can't actually translate what they're saying until you can see the power dynamics. And so we're at this point in time in the country where if we can get our shit together in the next year and stabilise and bypass this madness, and if women stand up and do what we're doing, that might offer some stability. But we're at a point in time where we're at massive risk. You know, fascism could emerge. And really, the Labour left are not, you know, they don't mind 100,000 people dead. They're not going to mind a couple of zeros onto that. You know, they cannot reflect. And we're just in this really, really dangerous position as a country. And the trans rights thing has just popped up in the middle of it as just like another fucking aspect of this massive inequality crisis we've got. And all inequality means is power relations. And all these power relations are exposed and have to be renegotiated. And we're kind of at a crossroads where we could either get our shit together and adjust to a new age and reduce circumstances and understand that we've got a lot less to do a lot more with, and we're going to have to be a bit more sensible and not be such knobheads. Or we could do what people do in the middle of identity crisis and do some mad shit. Now, I'm absolutely confident that the shifts that I laid out in playlist 1, we will return to that baseline. But that's no guarantees about what the crisis in between that takes us there is like. And being as there are all the things that are supposed to kind of mediate inequality are not fucking working. You know, the left are screwed, all the systems I'm talking about are screwed. I'm resorting to bloody YouTube videos in a futile scream into the void. This country is at a major crossroads. And I don't know. I don't see any evidence around Westminster that they even understand the shit that we're in. Never mind that they're willing to reflect on failure to come to solutions.